say go live. And we are live. Says we have an excellent connection. Is very good. Hey everyone, hi there. We're live, and just let us know if the audio is coming through correctly. Yeah, Ask Truth, please say something so we can confirm that we have your audio coming through. Yeah, I can't tell obviously because I've got my audio turned off on the stream on this side. But if anyone in the chat can... Yeah, we should not have echo today. I've got my headphones in. Okay, all good. Excellent. Thanks, Dynamis. Yep, so we are all good. Audio is fine. Excellent, guys. Hey, thanks all for being here. Looking forward. Hey, Dodo says we sound good. Yeah, guys. Hey, thanks for being here today. Of course, we're going to pick up where we left off last week, discussing basically Islam versus Paul. I can hear Lloyd. So, Lost Truth, say something again. All good there, Dynamis? Audio is good. Excellent stuff. Okay, guys. Yeah, so we're going to pick up where we left off last week. We're going to discuss basically Islam versus Paul. And as you know, if Islam can destroy Paul, then of course they can attempt to then undermine the New Testament, just as when they attack Noah, right, especially the laws of Noah, they can then undermine the Old Testament. And this allows them to destroy. So someone's saying audio is good and someone's saying audio is not good. Hi, Lloyd again. Dzień dobry, Marek. Dobry wieczór. Oh. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of conflicting. I'm getting all clear on the audio and one or two confusing messages. We should be all clear on the audio. Yep. So, of course, as you know, Muslims want to undermine the Old Testament as well in various ways. They also undermine Noah, right? So, of course, one of these major attacks would be, attacks against what they call the laws of Noah, right? Which is also the covenant of Noah. So 100% not Ask Truth apologetics. How can we not have you coming through? That should not be the case. Audio is coming through just perfectly fine. No, he just retracted it. No, we can't hear Ask Truth. That is very odd. I can't hear him, it says. The audio is definitely coming through. Oh, great. Now we still can't hear you. Now, why would that be the case? Okay, I am going to... Gewoon Frank says everything is fine. So some people saying they can... So some people are saying they can hear it just fine and others are saying they cannot. That is very, very odd. Guys, yeah, we need to sort that. No, the volume is set up fine. Okay, so let me go back and make a change. I want to put you on the same channel as me. I'm going to change the channel setup. That is very odd. Refresh the page. So that says, okay, end time says loud and clear. So yeah, maybe they need to refresh because the audio is definitely going through. Let me hear if I can hear anything, guys. I'm going to say something.
Yeah, he keeps saying that he can't hear me. I'll make sign language, and maybe they'll understand me.
No, you're coming through for me. Guys, I'm getting his audio. His audio is coming through for me.
He said now we can. All good?
Yeah, guys, the audio isn't coming through from the beginning. Okay,
dude,
that's
bro,
weird.
seriously.
Maybe they refreshed the page, but the audio's been excellent. Okay, guys, sorry about that. So yeah, 4 minutes wasted on audio issues. I have no idea why. I spent the entire weekend setting everything up from scratch, literally building everything from scratch to get this. Sound is fine. If people can't hear, they should refresh their page. Gewoon
Yeah,
Frank,
but
ek glo jy's ek glo dis die antwoord, ja. So yeah, they needed to refresh the page. Okay, awesome guys. So back to the beginning. Briefly, recap of last week, then we're going to go dive in, and of course we have to recap on Paul and the Islamic approach to him, and then of course um, just like they attacked the New Testament through Paul, they attacked the Old Testament through Moses, and they attacked the Old Testament through especially Noah, right? To try to destroy the very first covenant, which is they call them the laws of Noah, the covenant of Noah. And but that's a very fascinating talk for another day. But let us get down to business. Ask truth. That was because you didn't say anything. That is no. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so here we are, guys. Recap
you
from
should hear
last
my
week.
silence, people.
There was a meteor shower last night to the Generative. Yes, it wasn't from us. We were putting out live audio. The audio was good. Maybe then guys refreshed their page.
Huh.
Marek P. So he refreshed the page and it worked. Okay, guys. So here we are. So we were discussing last week bullus, right, which are names of Paul, and of course we learn that in Tafsir ibn Kathir says that the apostles were supported with a powerful third messenger. We have Simon, John, and Paul, and the city was Antioch. Excellent. This, of course, is found in Quran 36:14, and this is Tafsir Ibn Kathir 36:14. Now, of course, this is the point where Muslims go and throw Tafsir Ibn Kathir under the bus, right? Because it
Because why?
supports, yeah,
Because it's emotional. If it emotionally doesn't, if they emotionally don't like it, then of course it's daif. Everybody knows that.
that's worse than
It's
Da'if.
just
It's Maudu, which is it's completely
oh,
fabricated. Da'if is just weak. But guys, you do know that Da'if means weak, right? But however, Da'if only refers to the chain of narration. Da'if doesn't refer to the mutton or the content, the words of the actual narration. It refers to the chain. So what that means is weak. It means that so you could have 100% authentic mutton, but the chain of narration, the isnad, can be Da'if. However, according to Sharia, even Da'if narrations are 100% legal, 100% acceptable, 100% authoritative. That's according to the Sharia, especially when a weak hadith, or shall we say a hadith with a weak chain of narration, mentions Muhammad, because there are numerous narrations that are taken of Muhammad that are weak, but are utilized in the Sharia itself, in the fiqh, in Islamic law, because they're considered 100% authentic. Just thought you should know that. Right. Hadith al-Khuraf is the worst. I've never heard of that. But anyway, so yeah. So on that point, of course, we also learned that an unknown stranger, some young boy, was given Jesus' likeness. He was then teleported through the roof of a house. And of course, Jesus went to heaven where he was given the wings of an angel. And of course, where Jesus had both angelic, celestial, and terrestrial natures. So he had two natures, an angelic, celestial nature, and a terrestrial nature. So Jesus was given two natures. Very, very interesting that he has a heavenly nature and a human nature, according to Tabri, volume 4, page 123, in the story of Jesus.
now, how
Right?
many, Lloyd? This is confusing to me. So Jesus has three different natures:
I don't know, the
celestial,
angelic celestial,
terrestrial.
I think, means, well, he's given wings. So,
Yeah.
but it
Okay.
says he
So
was
he's
both human and
angelic.
celestial.
That's crazy. How many natures does Allah have? How many can he take on?
Now, that is a good question.
Hmm. Isn't
Allah.
it?
Okay, Al, how's it going? Alpha, Omega, Noahide laws are a set of imperatives which, according to the Talmud, were given by God as a binding set of universal moral laws for the sons of Noah. Yeah, now I've actually got an entire set of notes on that, but we'll get back to that in a minute. Yeah, so what kind of nature? Technically, Allah is just spirit.
Yeah,
So
but so you're telling me that Jesus has more capabilities in terms of his nature than the Almighty Allah has?
basically, Allah can't come to earth, but Jesus can come to earth as a human.
And he
Yeah,
can go to heaven and he can transfigure and transform. Huh. Does that
fascinating.
strike you as odd? I mean, to me that's odd, right? Like that they've got this source where Jesus is much more powerful than their Allah, and yet somehow they're like, "Oh, we worship this less powerful guy." It's to me it's kind of interesting that their logic takes them there.
Man, I didn't write it, but yeah, these are questions that Muslims have not thought through correctly. And of course, you're going to have a bunch of no-name commenters giving you their
Hmm.
opinions as opposed to actually going into the actual sources from their top scholars. But saying God can't become human means you're limiting God. Agreed, that's Yeshua now.
Yeah,
However,
exactly.
don't forget, God, in one sense, has a limit in that God doesn't do contradictories. For instance, Yahweh doesn't do evil and he doesn't
Correct.
lie, right? So, because he's Logos. Whereas
Hmm.
Allah, to limit Allah, is a sin in Islam. So, in other words, Allah is able to do evil and Allah is able to lie because to limit Allah is a sin in Islam and Allah is not Logos, Allah is will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Merrick P here says, was Allah not in the bush? Uh,
That's a
I don't
good
know.
question. And of course, Allah's word was sent to earth as Jesus. So is his word separate from him? Does his word not arrive, but he can't?
Hmm,
It's all very confusing. I wish we
I'm
all knew.
confused.
I
I'm
wish
very
we knew.
confused.
And of course, there's back to the issue of Paul. Of course, as you know, they mention here that the apostles were slain. Right? They speak of Nero ruled for 14 years. He slew Peter and crucified Paul head down. Now, obviously, we know that Peter was crucified and Paul was beheaded. However, it should be noted that Paul was a Roman citizen, and as a Roman citizen, it was not legal to crucify Roman citizens, so he could not be crucified. He had to be beheaded, which just tells us how knowledgeable Tabri was. In other words, ignorant.
Right, and that again shows how wrong Islam is on history. So, like historically, they are absolutely incorrect. Scientifically incorrect. Theologically, it's an absolute disaster. So I just love when we learn these things, buddy. It
Yeah.
just gets me excited.
Yeah. Also, yeah, Malik's saying Allah's the best deceiver. So Allah is makr, right? Makara. So what that means is the context there. In fact, we can go over this later towards the end. I can cover that in more detail because I've got some detailed notes on that. But basically, that is to deceive, to bind, to lie to, and to conspire against. However, the scholars will try to tell you that in the context of Allah, it means he was doing something good. He wanted to save Jesus. Whereas in the context of humans doing it, the word means evil. But in the last case, it means good. So, okay, whatever. Islam's inverted logic strikes again. Yes, it does. Okay, so yeah, we can move on at this point. Unless you have anything else to add, At.
No, let's keep on moving.
Okay, so now, as we know, Paul did missionary journeys with Barnabas, and he also did a missionary journey with Silas. Right? We're not going to discuss the second one. At some point, I'll probably come back to you and talk about some of that. I've actually got lots more notes that I'm not using because otherwise we'd be at 3 weeks listening to this. But so Paul and Barnabas waxed bold and said it was necessary that the word of God should have first been spoken to you. But seeing you put it from you and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life, we turn to the Gentiles. So Paul and Barnabas were in agreement that they had a duty to speak to the Jews and try to convert the Jews, to let the Jews know the Messiah had been born and that a new commandment was upon them. However, they generally rejected the message. Right. And at this point, the decision was made, well, let us speak to the Gentiles, let us speak to the pagans. And the message obviously was heard and accepted amongst the pagans, and it grew very, very rapidly. Within 3 years, it had gone from the Holy Land all the way to Spain, Asia Minor, Turkey. So it was all over Europe. It covered Europe. So things had gone very well. And Paul wasn't the only one making these missionary journeys. He never made it to Spain. And of course, it had reached Rome long before he did. Right. But of course, we see here there was a partnership with him and Barnabas, and they both spoke the same message. They had the same idea. So if Paul was corrupting Christianity by teaching it to the Gentiles, then so was Barnabas. Don't know why anyone goes after Barnabas. Any thoughts from you, At?
Well, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, so I'll just say it really briefly. To the Jew first, right, and then to the
Mm-hmm.
Gentile. That was the words of Paul, and I mentioned that absolutely follows Jesus being sent to the lost sheep of Israel, and then right before his ascension, he says, "Go and preach the gospel to all nations." So they're following exactly what the gospels say to do. So I think this works to strengthen and confirm that Paul and Barnabas in this circumstance are both following the Lord Jesus and what he demonstrated and what he taught.
Excellent, yeah. And then long time, therefore, abode they, speaking boldly in the Lord. So it says they spent a lot of time speaking the Gospels, speaking boldly in the Lord, which would be the Lord Jesus, which gave testimony unto the word of his grace and granted signs and wonders to be done by their hands. So they spoke in the name of Jesus. They spoke about his message. They gave testimony unto the word of his grace. So they're speaking of they, not just Paul. So clearly there was a harmony between them. Then all the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas. Sorry, that's taken from the King James version. It's Acts
Yeah.
14 verse 3. Then all the
Mhm.
multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles by them. That's Acts 15 verse 12. Your thoughts, At?
No, I think what you're saying here is perfect. So I just want to keep on rolling with this.
Yeah. So obviously the first Christians were Jews,
Mhm.
right? Jesus was born a Jew. Jesus technically died a Jew, right? So yeah, we need to bear that in mind. So they were the chosen people. They did bring the message. They did bear witness to that message. Now, certainly, a number of them, due to various political reasons, obviously the Pharisees didn't want to relinquish their power
Mhm.
because they felt that this would obviously take away their hold, their stranglehold over the Jews. They clearly stood against his message. However, the original Christians were Jews, and they still, at least to some degree, well, actually, that's a technical discussion we'll get into another time. So now we need to understand that Christianity is under attack from atheist secularism, and it's
Mhm.
it's often not just atheism; it's actually more like anti-theism. In fact, most specifically, anti-Christianism. And of
Mhm.
course, we have postmodern relativism, which is really just communism under a new name, and we have Islam. Islam, of course, needs to destroy anything that came before it. Don't forget, if you've heard of the term Jahiliyyah, right? So you've got the Jahiliyyah, which is the time of barbarism, the time of ignorance before Islam.
Mm. Right.
Islam has to destroy anything that came before it, which is why ISIS, for instance, who were 100% Sunni and 100% Sharia compliant, at no point did they deviate from the actual known Sharia of Sunni Islam. They were destroying everything that came before. That's why 10,000 churches were destroyed in North Africa by the Muslims. You barely see the foundations of those today. That's why
Right.
ISIS went around destroying statues and everything,
Mhm.
because they must destroy everything from the Jahiliyyah. Uh,
Yep.
Comments, it's all sides, also major eyes of black Hebrew, the fake Hebrew Israelites, you mean the fake Hebrew,
Yeah.
tell them I said that.
Mhm.
I've called them that to their faces. So yeah, the black, well, at least online, I've called them the fake Hebrew Israelites. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, original Mohammedans were Christians too. Actually, that's a very complex discussion there. Actually, let me test something that I want to have a look at. So we've got this comment. I'm going to see if I can. This comment should hopefully show up now, so I can make comments appear on the screen. Not quite the way StreamYard
Magic.
does, but I can make those comments appear on the stream. So original Mohammedans were Christians too. If you look through the sources, and I'm busy reading a book called The Sources of the Quran, when you read through that, you'll find that Islam has a lot in common with Christianity. However, it has more in common with Gnostic Christianity, quote unquote. Right. So there's more in common with the Gnostic ideas, which were a rejection of logos, which were a rejection of actual Orthodox Christianity, and try to impose this sort of magical set of beliefs on Jesus, right, and on the
Mhm.
Bible. So you've got a strong borrowing from like the Israelite Gospel of Thomas and the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. Those are two different books, as well as other Gnostic scrolls. And then you've also got a strong borrowing from the Talmudic legends of the Torah, not the actual Torah itself. And then you've also got borrowings from various other religions, from Hinduism. You've got small smatterings of borrowings. You've got from various pagan religions. You've got from others. So Islam is really it's a mishmash of everything you can think of.
Yeah.
So yeah, it certainly does
I
borrow
mean,
from
that
Christianity.
makes
Yeah.
sense, right? That makes sense. If you're an illiterate 7th century man, um, engaged in trading right goods from east to west and all over the place, you're going to hear all of these stories, and it's going to click in your mind, and then what you're going to do over time, if you're going to try to start your own religion, is you're not going to just invent something from scratch. You're going to take little bits and pieces and little inspirations from all over the trade world at that time, and you're going to start to kind of put it into a singular, although very strange and disconjointed narrative. And then that's kind of, at least my theory of where Islam kind of came from. It's just like this mishmash of random bits of information. If I
Yeah,
recall correctly, I think one of Muhammad's nicknames was the ear, basically because he
correct,
believed everything that he heard. So
correct.
it, that theory kind of works to explain all of the different um, strange kind of world religions all tied up into the narrative of Islam.
Yeah, no, agreed. So yeah, that's an interesting discussion. That's actually worth another show. I've got notes on that,
Hmm.
and also I'm busy reading a book which is on the sources. It's about 300 pages, so it's going to take me a while to read it, um, amongst everything else, and then do slides in it. But to learn about the sources of Islam, where the stories come from, it's from a variety of different sources. Who's the author of the book Sources of It? That's Tisdall, Tisdall. Uh, Actually, let me see if I have it. Let me actually see. No, I don't have it open. I'll bring it up later. Remind me later towards the end, and we can go through some of these things separately and just drop hints at some of these things. Tisdall, right? So modern and fake Israelites pick and choose and twist scripture. Yeah, in 2020, we're starting to work out this. Yeah. Okay, so Christianity is under attack, right? Now, Paul, the claim is, right? So atheists often say the same things as Islamic apologists, okay? Atheists, oddly enough, being very compatible with Islam. Now, as you know, Islam is the religion of peace, which is why people are afraid to criticize it in case they get killed, right? So basically, now you have these people going around claiming that Paul invented the majority of Christian doctrines, right? We also have people saying that Jesus did not teach the doctrines taught by Paul and that Paul did not know Jesus of the Gospels, but only a cosmic Christ, which is a very Gnostic idea because the flesh is dirty, the flesh is unclean, which is why Allah does not come to earth, because that would make Allah dirty. Allah is just an idea, this spirit, this ghost, right? And that is very much the Gnostic idea of the demiurge and various other ideas. But that's again off the topic for today's discussion. But that's why Allah does not come to earth. That's why Allah does not have a fleshy human aspect, because Allah would make Allah dirty, because only the
Yeah, but he has
ideas,
a shin and two right hands, bro. So how
vagina
does that?
and a vagina. Don't forget,
I mean, I don't know.
I
I
didn't
don't know,
write
man.
it, dude. I didn't
There's
write it.
words.
I just I
This is
didn't write it.
confusing though. Why is he spirit and completely other, but then why does he have shins and hands and apparently vaginas? Like what in the world is this religion all about?
Hear and obey. Don't question. That's Islam, right?
That's the only way it could possibly survive. Well, that or if they had a sword and they would stab you or cut your head off
Yeah.
if
So
you
Mohammad's grandfather said so. End time saying was deep into paganism. Don't forget, he was married to his first wife Khadija by a priest who was very likely a what do they call them? Uh, I can't remember. It's a Gnostic sect. I can't remember the name. Idiomite, something. Just Eniomite, Idiomite. Oh, good grief! I was reading it earlier and it just slipped my mind. I usually know it offhand, but he was married to his first wife by a Gnostic priest, right? Gnostic Christian priest, of course.
Mhm.
And of course, your cam has just decided to make you small. I'm gonna have to make you big again. Oh my gosh, what has just happened to you?
Don't worry about me, man. As long as you can hear me. My face is not good. Just my
I'm gonna
voice.
bring you back. Oh my golly, I have no idea what happened. I'm gonna have to bring you back. There we go. That is very, very
Happy to
weird.
be back.
I have no idea what's going on here, but we shall fix it.
Did
We'll
you?
live.
Hey, we talked about this off camera, man. Did you remember to get the Ajwa dates? Did you eat those?
Oh, good grief! Not, I hate this. Why this is happening? This is so nuts.
That's it, man.
Here you're back. Okay, awesome stuff. We'll just ignore it for now. Yes, no, I did not. Okay, so he was married to by an Ebionite priest. Sorry, he and his first wife were married by an Ebionite priest, so a Gnostic. There's the story of Boheira or George, the monk at the well, who was a Nestorian priest, and then of course you have Nestor, a Nestorian priest. So he had numerous contacts with Gnostic priests. Yeah, he's drifting into space. My bad. So okay, so
I was telling him I was raptured just now, guys. I'm
yeah, he
back, man.
was.
It's all
Okay,
good.
so now the sources of these claims. What are the sources of these claims, right? So now, this book, The Myth Maker, Paul and the Invention of Christianity, this was written a long time ago. So this book argues that Jesus Christ never broke away from Judaism and that the Christian religion was founded by Paul. so that Jesus remained a Christian. This book was written in 1973, so many of the claims, like the term Pauline Christianity, is a late 20th century claim, and I believe it comes from this book. So the idea of Pauline Christianity, the term Pauline Christianity, is not an old term, it's a new term based on
Mm.
these renewed sort of creative attacks on the Christian religion. This was written by a Jew called Chaim Maccabee, right? And he was influenced by a man called Heinrich Gretz. And Maccabee claimed that Paul was not a Pharisee. He claimed that Paul was a Jewish convert. He claimed that Paul was not a Jew. He claimed that Paul was a Gentile. He claimed that Paul was a Gnostic via the Attis cult or something. He wasn't specific. He may have said Paul was a space alien. Okay, so maybe I made that up, but it was possible. Okay. He says we cannot believe anything in Paul's writings. He claims that the Ebionites, a Gnostic sect, are the true Christians. Right? These are up there with the crazies. Okay. Paul's elevation of Jesus to divine was what he called reversion to paganism,
Mm.
which is the idea that Christianity is actually derived from paganism. Okay. He claims that the Pharisees were the good guys. He claims that Jesus was a Pharisee. Obviously, this
Interesting.
is based on we don't know what. Okay.
Right, and that's what I was going to ask. I mean, what early surviving writings would declare that statement? Like, what would substantiate his claims? I mean, without reading the book, I'm not sure, but like, I just find it really, really difficult to take anybody's claims seriously in that sense. I mean, do you know what sources he's pulling any of this information?
Well, I will give you one example of a review. So there was a scathing reviewer who called his book fiction, said this book is fiction. At the end of the review, he says, "Thus I must conclude that Maccabee's book is not good history, not even history at all. Whether
Hmm.
it is good fiction is another matter." And this was so the reviewed work, The Mythmaker, Paul and the Invention of Christianity by Chaim Maccabee. And this review was written by John G. Gager of Yale and Princeton University. Okay, there's
Mm.
a link if you want to look it up, right?
Yeah.
So William Gager, or John Gager, sorry, John G. Gager was the William Danforth Professor of Religion. He won the President's Award for Distinguished Teaching in 1988. So he was a professor at both Yale and at Princeton, right?
It's kind of a big deal.
He won the Howard T. Berman Award for Distinguished Achievement in the Humanities in 2005. He was the Princeton Director of the program in the Ancient World, which is ancient history, and he was the Master of Forbes College. Okay, and here's a link to this guy's to who this guy is. He basically said the book, you've got to read it. He says the guy's book was fiction. He said it was just bogus.
What's
Okay.
funny is the book is actually the irony here I'm looking at is the book is called The Myth Maker. And
Yes.
it's not talking about Paul, it's actually talking about the guy who wrote the book. He's the myth maker.
Yeah.
So
No, true. And End Time, actually, I'm just going to see if I can grab this and paste it on the screen. It's not my best, definitely was not my best effort, but End Time says it is difficult to show that any mystery religion directly worshipping a dying and reviving God whose death is salvific predates Christianity. So, well, don't forget all the Nag Hammadi scripts, all the Gnostic scripts postdate Christianity. They come hundreds of years after Christianity. Okay,
yep.
so that form of paganism actually comes after, not before.
Mhm.
Right. Actually, I'm preparing some slides at the moment. You've got the stories about Mithras and the stories of Horus and all that, and how they have the same lineage as Jesus and the same story, and Jesus is just a carbon copy. Bogus. That's nonsense. I'm busy
It
working
is.
on that as well, so I'll get that done in a while.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
funny he brought that up though, right? We were literally just talking about this right before we hopped on. So
yeah, yeah. So mystery vocabulary. It's clear that Maccabee concentrates on this long abandoned aspect of Pauline research to further his polemic against. Yeah, look, I mean, look, it is true that there are Jews that hate Christians, but then again, it's also true that there are Christians that hate Jews. So, that's just one of those sad things of life. So now, 2,000 years ago, a Jewish preacher walked across the Galilee, gathering followers to establish what he called the kingdom of God. Don't forget, this was a kingdom of heaven. This was not a kingdom on the earth. The
mm,
revolutionary movement he launched was so threatening to the established order that he was executed as a state criminal. Within decades after his death, his followers would call him God. This is Zealot, The Life and Times of Jesus of Nazareth by Reza Aslan, the man who was eating brains not so long ago and made some wonderful odd claims. Now, he claims that Paul had an extraordinary lack of interest in the historical Jesus and was at loggerheads with the Jewish Christians of Jerusalem. Now, we've discussed some of these. Now, we know that Paul was not looking to preach the gospel. Paul was talking to people who already knew the gospel. They were looking at dealing with issues that the church was facing. How do we apply Jesus' teachings to new situations?
Mhm.
Right. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to get into some of those examples coming up here in just a second of some of the things that Jesus did teach, and he would teach a principle matter, right? And then Paul would work to address it in more of a specific methodological manner. So I think we're going to be moving forward into this here in a second. So I'll just kind of
Right.
hold off until then.
Yeah, Coco Jasmine asks, can there be Christianity, its core beliefs and principles without Paul? Many would argue that Paul was Christianity's greatest apologist, that he was its greatest missionary. Would you agree with that, AT?
No, I think so. And just to answer the question just kind of directly, the answer is we don't need Paul. I mean, when you have the Gospels, you have take his writings out, and that's what I find very interesting about the Bible in itself. I always imagine, what if these books weren't here? Would I still come to the same conclusion? Would I still have the same message? And for me personally, when I read through it and I take those out of my brain, yes. Like you still have the letters of John, you still have Revelation, you still have the book of James, Jude. You can make an argument one way or another for Hebrews, but then you also have the four Gospels, and you have the books of the book of Acts. And in there is the complete understanding, and really just the Gospels. In there is the complete understanding of who Jesus was, what he taught. We've got the divinity
Mhm.
of Christ, the Trinity, um, and the outpouring of kind of the promise and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So you don't need any one particular person. It's
Mhm.
all there. And guys, we're all Christians because most of
Yeah,
us are Christians because we've experienced the risen Christ. We've experienced the power of the Holy Spirit. And when we read through the Gospels, like it's just this experiential thing that gives us further
yeah.
belief. And then for me at least, and I don't know your story, Lloyd. For me at least, I had the experience first, and then I went out to try to make sense of my experience. I know some people go kind of in the reverse direction, but no, I think we don't need to have the writings of Paul. I think it makes it a lot more clear. It makes it a lot more applicable. The theology that he provides and the kind of the commentary as to the life and teachings of Jesus is incredibly valuable, and I thank God that we
Mm.
have them. And I think it's preordained that we do have them. So um,
It
you
should
know,
be
it's only
noted that
speculation.
that Paul did write something like nearly one third of the Gospels.
Mhm.
Right, one third of the Gospels,
Oh,
28%
yeah,
something
the New Testament.
approximately,
Yeah. Mhm.
is actually, well, the New Testament, sorry, of the entire New Testament, my bad, are actually written by Paul. So yeah, he was very much critical to the development, the application. And we will see one example of where Paul is actually tasked with trying to find, how do I apply the teaching, the ethics, the morality of Jesus to a situation that Jesus never specifically addressed. And that's a
Right.
matter of exegesis. And Paul does that. And this is what Paul does. Paul
Mhm.
doesn't invent anything new. Paul's trying to apply Jesus' teachings to situations that were never explicitly dealt with by Jesus in his day. Right. So the
Right.
question from Stephen Gilchrist: if Paul is a messenger of as the Quran and Tafsir claim, why would Allah send a messenger to destroy the religion of another messenger? Um, yeah, dude, we need to. Um, yeah. What else can I say?
It's Allah is will and not logos. There's not logic behind it. But I think to answer that question really quickly from the mind of a Muslim, I think what they're going to be what they're going to try to be rationalizing, and that's why they say it was corrupted by Paul, right? The reason why the Quran came was because the message of Jesus was somehow corrupted, and it was just out of necessity this final revelation had to happen. So if I'm going to be putting on my Muslim hat, that would, I think, would be what they're trying to argue.
I mean, they'll say whatever's convenient at the time, and of course we have this guy, the God Delusion. So these are three of the major texts that actually lead the charge. Now, of course, if you read through the Islamic books, like for instance, what the Muslims learn in their their tarbiyah guides. They learn at the madrasa when they're youngsters. They're 5 years old. They start going to madrasa, their version of Sunday school, basically Friday school. They go to those and they get these tarbiyah guides, right? And then, of course, they go to mosque. But if you read those, you'll see that all of them are polemics against Christianity. They all call or imply or state that Christianity is false. Remember, Christianity is Din al-Batil, right? The Din al-Batil means the religion that is void, worthless, right? Batil is one of the names of Satan. So Christianity is effectively a religion of Satan today. It has been superseded. It has been replaced by Islam. And yeah. Now, so these are some of the three major. So these three books that we've just seen, these are sources of some of the major arguments that come out today, right? So that's where many of these arguments are derived from. So people are quoting out of these books, and Hayam Maccabee's book was one of the original sources of the polemic against modern polemics against Christianity, and where the term, I think, Pauline Christianity comes from. So now Paul persecuted Christians. So how did he invent something that existed before he became one? Right. This is something that of course, it's pretty obvious. Why would Paul try to destroy something he was about to invent and spread? And Paul applied Christian thinking. He applied the teachings of Jesus to great success. And now let's have a look at what Bart Ehrman has to say. So let me enable my chat. I'm going to turn off my mic and I'm going to play this little thing and let me know this should come through. So
Trying to figure out where I am now. So I can't hear any sound. Are they coming through on sound? So I can't hear any. I'm on the video and I can't hear any sound, buddy. Lloyd, can you hear me anymore, buddy? Yeah, can you hear me, Lloyd? I can hear you. I don't know if they can hear you.
guys, sorry, is the audio from the video not coming through?
Yeah, I don't think they can hear you anymore. I don't know why. I think they can hear.
I've enabled my audio again, but guys, so is the audio from the video not coming through? Just tell me, guys, is the audio from? I'm going to try this again, but the audio from the video should be coming through. Is that audio coming through, guys? Okay, great. So some are saying yes, some are saying no. This is odd because the audio is definitely going through.
And I'm trying to listen to it on my phone through the earpiece, and I can't hear it.
Okay, I am going to. Let me try again. Sorry, guys. I guess I'm still getting the hang of this. I thought I had
Christianity.
Okay, try now. Let me know if you can hear the audio.
If you had to line all the apostles up, I get the vibe that for you, Paul is the cornerstone of the whole story.
Well, the reason.
And was that coming through? Oh, darn it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That time worked. It worked for me, brother.
Okay, yeah, it should be coming through fine. The audio is definitely active. We heard it briefly. Okay, guys, so it's working now. My apologies. I fixed up the audio. Yeah.
If you had to line all
play
the
this and try
apostles up, I get the vibe that for you, Paul is the cornerstone of the whole story.
Well, the reason I think he is somewhat different from what a lot of people say. Some people say that Paul invented Christianity. And that can't be true because Paul was persecuting Christians before he became a Christian. And so if he invented Christianity, he would have had nobody to persecute. So that's not right. And it's not right that he invented the idea that Jesus' death and resurrection brought about salvation, because that's what Christians were saying before him. The thing that made Paul really key, as I argue in this book, is that he realized that followers of Jesus, this Jewish Messiah sent from the Jewish God to the Jewish people, followers of Jesus did not have to become Jewish. You could be a converted pagan and believe in Jesus and in the God of Jesus, but you didn't have to adopt the ways of Judaism. And this realization made it possible for Christianity to move away from being a sect within Judaism to being a worldwide religion. And if that hadn't happened, then Christianity would have ended up with the kind of historical significance of other Jewish sects. And they'd be as historically significant as the Sadducees or the Essenes, which are groups that are important for historians of ancient religion, but they're not exactly the sorts of things people worry about these days. And so he made it possible for Christianity to become what it did, which is the dominant religion of the empire.
If the Gospels of the New Testament were written long decades after the death, the written death of Jesus Christ, we're not talking about reporting. How do we get the Gospels if they were written by people who didn't actually see it happen?
Well, so what you do, historians do the same thing with the Gospels that they do with any other book. If they want to talk about, any figure in Roman history, for example, if they want to talk about Pompey, for example, or Crassus or Brutus, they look at what kind of sources are available. And sometimes for ancient people, we have contemporary sources, but more commonly, we have sources that are decades or even centuries later. If you've got independent sources that did not collaborate with one another, but they absolutely are independent of one another, and they all mention the same figure, that is pretty good evidence that there was a figure. With the Gospels, we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke all use some of the same sources, but usually scholars typically isolate 4 different sources behind Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, behind Matthew, Mark, and Luke, 4 sources, and they isolate 3 or 4 sources behind the Gospel of John. Paul had access to none of that stuff because Paul was writing before all that, and they didn't have access to Paul. You start adding up the sources, and you end up with 10 or 12 sources independently within a few decades that are all talking about this man Jesus. So if they'd all gotten it from one source, you'd say, well, somebody made it up. But it's kind of hard to say somebody made it up when you have all of these sources.
Okay, everyone. Yeah, so we finally heard that. My apologies. Still getting the hang of some of these features. But yeah, we've all heard that. So Bart Ehrman, as someone noted in the comments, Bart Ehrman just abrogated Bart Ehrman. So we've got one of the greatest critics of Christianity, a former Christian turned atheist, or who suddenly somehow now comes out in support of at least this aspect of Paul, and discusses the how one actually textually verifies the authenticity of the Bible. Right. So, of course, when asked why he doesn't critique Islam and doesn't critique the Quran, he doesn't want to die. As
I think he said when he stops valuing his life, he will do that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's very odd, Marek, yes, to hear Bart Ehrman actually support So the transcript is here. The link is actually very defined. Did Paul invent Christianity and corrupt the Bible? It's actually like a 30-minute interview, and it's actually well worth listening to. It's very good. That was just a 3-minute section out of it that we listened to. But yes, he makes some very, very good points, right? And he makes it very clear. Yeah,
I'd like to say something really quick about Bart Ehrman.
sure.
At least this is just my opinion. I don't think Bart Ehrman is necessarily an enemy to Christianity. I think a lot of people are intimidated by him because he knows the New Testament so well. He knows the history of the transmission of the text, and he's an atheist, right? But I think when you really start to look at his research, he's had some really good debates. So I think it was Dan Wallace and James White. Uh, they all agree essentially on the facts of the matter, um, in fact, Bart Ehrman says himself he's not an apostate from Christianity because of the reliability of text. In fact, he believes that our text is highly reliable. Now he'll say things and kind of sensationalize it by bringing up points about how you can't know for sure, right? Since they're copies of copies, everybody always says that. But he agrees that the text that we have is like the most well-preserved text of anything coming from that time period of antiquity. So I'd encourage people to watch those debates if they're ever interested in it, and to take some of the information he has and start to apply different conclusions to it. And the reason why he's an atheist has nothing to do with the New Testament. It has to do with the problem of evil, which is an entirely other topic. But I just wanted to throw that information out there for you guys.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Just sending a message to. Yeah. So, however, Bart Ehrman in this case does come out very much in support of the documentary evidence for Christianity, at least for the Bible, and he obviously destroys any counter argument from Muslims because Muslims love to use Bart Ehrman against Christians. In this case, Bart Ehrman comes out and blows them out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in this case, they'll have to find a different argument or again throw him under the bus, which is yeah, but Bart Ehrman doesn't hate Christianity, agreed, but Bart Ehrman also makes a lot of money by writing these what seemingly very contradictory. His public books, right? His lay books basically just seem to contradict any of his scholarly work. And he makes a lot of money off this conflict. And when asked, when pressed, do the Gospels contradict, from your research, do the Gospels as you know them contradict the story of Christianity as we know it today? And he'll say no. You say they very much support and verify the story as we have it, but he loves to make money off this controversy that he's created. So yeah. So anyhow, moving on. So we have Matthew 5:17-20. Think not. Now this is another argument that people love to use against Christianity. Think not that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I came not to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass away from the law till all things be accomplished. Now, it's interesting that the writing style of that period was very different to the way we have it today. And we need to understand that the law and the prophets are the nicknames of two sets of books in the Old Testament. The law there's a number of books in the Old Testament known collectively as the law. I think it's 17 books, and you have another set of books called the prophets. I think it's 12 books. Collectively, the Bible is one coherent story from the beginning to the end, and they all speak of they all foreshadow the coming of Jesus, the new covenant, right? And of course, this culminates in the birth, the death, the resurrection of Jesus. And of course, the new covenant that is created. So basically, the covenant of God moves from a works-based concept of religion to one of grace. Right now, before we get into that, and I'll have you discuss that a little bit, AT, if you want. But if the covenant agreement is fulfilled, now in this case, people say, but the law, the prophets, the law is not the Sharia the way Islam understands the Sharia, like a legal system, like law in courts. No, right? The law are these books that speak of the new law, right, as relates to Jesus. Now, the covenant is an agreement; it is a contract, and this contract has been fulfilled. So when he says, "I came to fulfill the contract," well, the contract has been fulfilled. Therefore, the contract is no longer binding. It no longer applies, right? So that law, the old law of works, falls away. Now, to fulfill the law appears at first to mean a literal enforcement of the law in the least detail. Until heaven and earth pass away, nothing of the law will pass. We see that in Matthew 5:18. However, we need to understand in this case, this is not a literal interpretation. The passing away of heaven and earth is understood in apocalyptic nature as the turning of the ages. So the age changed with the apocalyptic event of Jesus' death and resurrection. We entered a new age. So apocalypse, remember, Paul considered his meeting with Jesus or God on the road to Damascus as an apocalypse,
Mm-hmm.
right? An apocalypse does not mean, in that context, the end of the world. It means the bringing forth of something new. So Paul said his meeting with God on the road to Damascus was an apocalypse. The world did not end. So apocalypse has a different meaning, a different context. We covered that early in the beginning. So this is a sort of turning of the ages, and the age changed with Jesus' death and resurrection. So those to whom this gospel is addressed are living in the new and final age. Before I go on, your thoughts, AT?
Yeah, man. So that's fantastic. I think people need to really like just look up the definition of apocalypse. I think people seem to think of movies and all that kind of stuff where the word apocalypse is used as the end of the world, which it's not. It can be applied to events leading to the end of the world, but that's not exactly what it means. So you did a really good job summarizing, Lloyd, what apocalypse means. But what we're talking about here, guys, is a change from the old covenant into a new age, into the new covenant. And wouldn't it be really interesting, Lloyd, and anybody watching, if there was some sort of prophecy about this change of covenants? I mean, if there was something in the Old Testament prophesying that, do you think that would strengthen the Christian position?
That might be very interesting. Yeah. So let us know if there is.
Let's see. So, what we've got here in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 31 and 32, it says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant I have made with their fathers in the days where I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke, though I was their husband," which we're going to talk about husband and wife stuff here in a little bit if we have time, declares the Lord. So what is this saying? What is this saying to you, Lloyd? Kind of how do you understand this?
Just give me 1 second. I want to bring that up on the screen so that everyone can see this. So I'm going to just get rid of OneNote and just bring up.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Behold, the days come. So this is Jeremiah 31:31 that AT just read. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand. But he says he's making a new covenant. I want to. Do we have a set of books in the Bible called the New Covenant or the New Testament? Is there something like that?
Oh, if there was, I would really be interested in reading it.
Right. So we have the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, and we have the New Covenant. Looks like there's a New Covenant that is based on the verses you've just read. Do you want to tell us some more, please?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just obvious here, guys. It's very obvious and apparent that the prophecy of this, the coming of this, was foretold. So I'll read another verse from Ezekiel chapter 37:26. It says, "I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will set them in their land and multiply them, and they will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore." So it's almost like these different prophets are over here prophesying about some sort of cosmic change or some cosmic peace and whatnot, and that's what Christ's entire job was. That's why he went to the cross. It was to appease God's wrath for the sins and transgressions that we have had, and to bring peace between mankind and God. That's exactly what this is prophesying here, guys. And so I just want us to consider that, think about it, and then we can keep moving forward, Lloyd, unless you have something else to add.
Oh, no, that's excellent. No. So hopefully, guys, that makes some sense. Hello. Hey there, Reason Dancers. How you doing? Glad to have you in the chat. So yes, so a new covenant is prophesied, right? And these prophecies, the law and the prophets, so the prophets have been satisfied. Those books of the Bible have been satisfied, right? So we've had this change, this changing of the ages. and thus this has been met. Now you have people obviously deliberately trying to misinterpret this, to deliberately obfuscate the meaning, and it's important for us to actually study our own scriptures, know what they are, know what they mean, so that we can defend them. I believe there are references in the New Testament that we have to understand and know why we defend what we defend. Right? So yeah. Now during Jesus' ministry, when the kingdom is already Reason, if you have any comments to make, please drop them in the chat. And looking forward to my next stream. I will be doing a stream with Reason this week, tentatively scheduled for 9 p.m. Warsaw time, 8 p.m. UK time, which should be 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US, and that is for this Tuesday. Yeah. So during Jesus' ministry, when the kingdom was already breaking and his mission remained within the framework of the law, though with anticipations of the age to come, right? And in Matthew 5:21-48, Jesus speaks of this using language like, "Ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, but I say unto you." So it has been said, it was true, it was then, but I say unto you, and he brings a new message, right? And recently wrapped up on a stream. So now yes, I know I was watching a stream and then I had to leave to come to this stream, Reason, but thanks for dropping in. So the law and the prophets, these are the names of the two major divisions of the Old Testament. So you have the law, or the law of Moses, which consists of the first 5 books of the Old Testament, known as the Torah, meaning instruction, teaching, or law in Hebrew, and the Pentateuch in Greek. So we have Genesis, creation, Exodus, the exit, Leviticus relating to the Levites, we have Numbers, and Deuteronomy, second law, right? That's why we also get the term deuterocanonical. The law is a continuing narrative prophecy of the coming of the Messiah. So we have a narrative from the beginning all the way through talking of a new beginning, the new age. And the prophets consist of books grouped into different arrangements according to Jewish or Christian tradition. The groupings include Joshua, Judges, 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And we just read from 2 of those books. And of course, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. And Paul explains that if we attempt to keep the law via works, we will lose our salvation. Jesus states that the Old Testament points to him. So it is not a legal code, right? It's not a set of laws that gives you a parking ticket or chops off your head like certain religions we shouldn't talk about too often. But so it's not about parking tickets, but yeah, it's a foretelling of the coming of Jesus and the new age, the new law. Islam does refer to the Sharia of Jesus, which was superseded by the Sharia of Muhammad, of course, except for those things that are explicitly maintained in the Sharia of Muhammad. But the Sharia of Muhammad is a legal code, parking tickets, as I said, beheadings, chopping off of hands, right? Whereas this is not that kind of law. Islam legislates law. Christianity does not legislate law, right? So we have a separation between church and state. Islam does not. So what are the statements of James and Peter on the law and the foreshadowing of Jesus? AT, just keep an eye on the chat so that we, right? So
well,
what are the
statements there's one comment by JIB. I'm not sure what he's trying to say. He said, so the law isn't passed away yet. I don't know if you want to respond to that or if you want me to respond.
That was, so basically in that, till heaven and earth, not one jot or tittle shall pass away till all things be accomplished. However, with the death and resurrection of Jesus, that was accomplished. So the law has not passed away. However, the law is no longer binding. The law still exists. It's written, but the law is not binding. Paul, for instance, makes it very clear, if you look at some of the previous episodes, that what you have is a situation where you can follow the rules of the law. However, they are not the route to salvation. You can follow them for the sake of tradition, because many Jews would still follow those, right? They were part of their culture. However, they were not the route to salvation. And also, they were not to be imposed on the pagans who were coming into the new faith, because they weren't adopting Judaism. They were not embracing Judaism, but Christianity. So those rules that were specific to the Jews should not become a yoke, a burden on the new Christians. Right?
Exactly.
So yeah, and on that point, we will come to that point as well. This is actually something very, very important that we need to discuss in that point. And I need to thank End Times for this, but let's continue here first. Paul does explain that if we attempt to keep the law via our works, via the law of Moses, the code of Moses, we will lose our salvation. And Jesus does state that the Old Testament is about him, right? So James says, whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, that's the grace of Jesus, right? Not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it. They will be blessed in what they do. That's brother James, right?
Yeah.
1 verse 25. James says in the old law of Moses, for whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. So this is Jesus' brother James telling us, whoever keeps the old law, the old Mosaic law, yet stumbles at just one point, he is guilty of breaking the whole of the law. For he who said, you shall not commit adultery, also said, you shall not murder. If you do not commit adultery, but do commit murder, you have become a lawbreaker. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged under the law of liberty. So Christians have adopted a new law. So if you break if you decide that you bind your life to the old law, the yoke of the old law, and you break one of those laws, you are guilty. You have sinned. There is no redemption.
Mhm.
However, we have a new law that frees us from these thousands of rules, these binding rules. The Sharia is like that. It's a yoke. It's thousands and thousands of rules and traditions. It's insanity. Hopefully that answers AT, your point.
Well, just connecting all of these things, right? So James is saying this. For instance, Paul says something very similar to what James said in James 1. In Galatians 5, he says, for freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery, right? To the yoke of the law, right? So again, speaking about grace, talking about how the law is important and upholding and not sinning is critical in that, right? So when you have a changed heart, you no longer want to break the law. But at the end of the day, guys, I think, Lloyd, you mentioned it. It's faith. Do you have faith in yourself and your own works to save you? Or do you have faith in God to keep his promise and to give you the gift of grace that he demonstrated for you while he was on the cross? I mean, it's honestly, it's a pride issue. Do you think you can control your outcome better than God, or do you trust God? Do you trust yourself more or God more? And I think that's where Islam really falls apart, as they try to pretend that it's up to them 100% in order to get them to where they want to go. Whereas we know and we've seen demonstrated that God loves us so much that we'd be willing to come to earth and pay for our sins himself so that we can be reconciled to him.
Good points. Yeah. So there's so many things we could discuss, but I have to condense some of this. At some point, I'll probably bring up some other notes. I've had someone, Rani Diaz. I need to go through some notes he's given. There's so many things we can discuss, so much detail here. But I'm trying to summarize. But yes, but thanks to everyone who's provided information on this. And also, I need to thank. I've had a few small donations, and I really am grateful. I'm really thankful for all of this. This does take up hours. Look, I know I've made some technical issues, but yeah, I'm still learning how all the stuff works. But yeah, I'm trying to get more professional. I spent hours and hours this whole weekend. I spent just literally learning, besides setting up the Christmas tree inside, which looks awesome. But yeah, this takes a lot of time, and I do want to thank those who've donated. I really am grateful. It really helps a lot, and I really appreciate it. So wrapping up a few final points. There were tensions between Paul and the other Jewish Christians. Yes, certainly there were. But Paul was looking to make a clean break. He needed to make sure they left Judaism as a yoke behind. And you had to find a middle ground with the new pagans that were coming in, the non-Jews. You had to find a middle ground for them, right, where they could meet, where they weren't forced to become Jewish. They weren't forced to circumcise themselves. Because the point wasn't to become a Jew. The point was to follow Jesus, not follow, the old rules of Judaism. Paul is honest about these. Notably, he speaks in Galatians about the conflicts. But of course, the church developed. Now, of course, if you look after Muhammad died, there was a massive war in Islam. Tens of thousands, well, at least 10,000 Muslims were killed, right, in a war between Ali and Aisha, Muhammad's wife, right, the one who never saw him naked. Right.
You had to throw that in there, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. Islam just makes fun of itself. So yeah. There were the apostasy wars. These were horrific, right? Of course, but here we just have a case of, as they were developing the theology and the church, there were conflicts. But of course, it's hard to break away from tradition, and breaking up is hard to do, right? Divorce is hard. Matthew often used Matthew is often used as evidence of conflict with Paul, right? But Matthew talks from his perspective. It's like an eyewitness event. When you talk to multiple eyewitnesses, you're going to get different views, and he presents more of the Jewish Christian perspective.
Mhm.
Paul wrote letters, epistles. Paul did not write gospels. Paul wrote letters, epistles, called epistles, not gospels, right? And the epistles were letters to assist the church in dealing with its issues. They were not, hey, do you know this guy called Jesus? Those weren't Paul's letters, right? Those are the gospels. Do you know what Jesus did? Paul was like, okay, guys, we know about Jesus, we know what he did, but how do we apply this? So they
Mhm.
assume, Paul's letters all assume knowledge of Jesus' teachings, and they refer to reminders of Jesus' teachings. They'll say, do you remember when we discussed this? Now, the final thing that we'll talk about to end with, does Paul make up his own teachings? That's an important question, right? And unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. Let not the wife depart from her husband. That's 1 Corinthians 7:10. So Paul refers here very explicitly to one of the teachings of Jesus, and it's one of the teachings of divorce. And they're saying, let not the wife depart from her husband. Do not divorce. Now, Paul speaks of the Lord's wishes. He says, yet not I, but the Lord. Now, Paul is actually very explicit when he's quoting the words of Jesus versus when he is saying what he thinks, right? So Paul speaks of the Lord's wishes, not his own, and repeats the words of Jesus. So Paul reminds the married people, right, the new Christians, of Jesus' principles of non-separation, which is in Mark 10, verse 9. This is one of the rare specific references to the teachings of Jesus. But then we go on in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 12, but to the rest speak I, not the Lord. Muslims will quote this out of context and say, see, it's just Paul making up stuff. No, Paul's saying, hold on, but now, 2 sentences later, right, 2 verses later, it's not, these are not the words of Jesus. Now, these are my words, so that we know who's saying what. If any brother that's a Christian hath a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away, let him not chase her away. He's saying, if you have become a Christian, if you are a Christian and you have a wife that is a pagan, or if you are a woman that's a Christian, you have a husband that is a pagan, right? He is saying, stay with them, because Jesus has said that marriage is sacred. It's a sacrament that is sacred to him, and therefore you need to stay together. And Paul is saying, so I say, based on this teaching, applying the ethics of Jesus, applying the morals of Jesus, I'm saying that you need to respect that union. So to the rest, Paul speaks of marriages in which only one partner is a baptized Christian. So this is a different situation to what Jesus spoke about. It's a new situation they haven't quite yet encountered, and Paul has to apply these teachings. And he says Jesus' prohibition against divorce is not addressed to this situation. Paul now extends the principle of non-separation to such marriages. He says, if there is peacefulness and the marriage is both parties sanctify this marriage, both parties respect this marriage, they love each other, there is a harmony in the union, right? This marriage is sacred to both of them, in which case, stay together, because this is your wife. And he goes on to say, in fact, that in this case, God blesses the union, and your children are also blessed. Your children also receive God's grace. So therefore, he says that the fact that you're a Christian and you love someone and you're with them, all of you are then given and blessed under the grace of God, and all of you will find salvation. Your thoughts, A.T.?
Yeah, so just to add on to it, I'm going to kind of ask you the similar question that I asked you earlier. Is if there is kind of a prophecy of this in the Old Testament, would that strengthen the case of both Paul and Jesus? Would that interest you?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Let me just read this quickly from that, and then we'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we can end off. So guys, we will end off soon in a few minutes. But now Paul says here, and the woman which hath an husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace. But it says here that if you stay together, if the marriage is sanctified by both parties, then that is a holy marriage in the sight of the Lord, and you are clean, because God's grace wipes away that sin.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that is something very, very important to bear in mind. And do you want to share your screen at all, or?
No, I got way too many things open to do that. So hopefully I
Okay.
can illustrate beautifully with my words.
Okay.
A couple of things I actually will say about that is Jesus talks about himself in the parables pretty frequently about being the groom, right, the bridegroom, and he talks about his followers and believers being kind of the bride, right? So obviously Jesus is perfect and sinless and God, and he's talking about marrying us, human, like humanity, right? Not in a literal sense, but in the metaphorical sense, marrying us. Are we perfect? No, right?
No.
We're adulterers essentially, right? Because we don't always follow God. We are not always loyal to his laws and his rules and stuff like that. And yet he remains faithful to us even when we fall away. So that should reflect in our own personal marriages, right? Barring sexual immorality and other things that we can get into at another time. Um, but that should be reflective. We should love our wives as Christ loved the church, and women should respect their husbands and all of those beautiful, wonderful things. And Matthew talks about this, which I think, Lloyd, you alluded to when he says that, I say to you that everyone who divorces a wife except on the grounds of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery themselves, right? So this idea of marriage and union is very strong, relating it back to God being our husband, so to speak, and us being kind of the wife, or the church being the wife. The one thing I was going to go into, sorry, I'm kind of going off here on a tangent as usual, is that there is a book of the Bible, Hosea, which talks about Hosea basically marrying his wife Gomer. So if anybody wants a good name for their daughter, Gomer is a beautiful name. Um, where she's a harlot, right? She's a prostitute, and sorry about that. And God says, keep going back to her, keep being faithful to her. And that is that is the demonstration of what God has done to us. That is a demonstration of what Jesus has done to us. And that's a demonstration to us who are Christians and what we should do to our spouses and provide for them.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So, guys, yeah, we should wrap it up at this point. I know there were some people asked some questions. I said we'd get to them at the end, but we've run over time. So, yeah, drop them in the chat, drop them in the comments. We'll pick them up next week. Some of these different things within Islam, and but hopefully we've addressed some of the issues regarding some of the attacks on Paul. Hopefully, we looked at some of the ideas from other New Testament authors that the old law is no longer valid. And there's a question from Coco Jasmine: is there a difference between the law of Moses and the law of Jesus? Well, that's a different covenant. Remember, God's covenants were bound to a time and a place and a person. So there was a covenant with Moses, there was a covenant with Abraham, a covenant with Noah, covenant with David, right? Then we have a new covenant with Jesus, right? So there are new testaments, new covenants, new agreements, new contracts, shall we say. So these covenants, there are four major covenants in the Bible. There's Moses, Abraham, David, and Jesus, right? Then there are 16 minor covenants, if I recall correctly. There's hundreds of them as far as I know, but
Yeah.
you have these major and minor covenants. So these are contracts and agreements that dated to a time and a place, so they pass away. So it's a contract. Once it's fulfilled, it's done, right?
Right.
So
And so one thing I think to add to that really quickly, sorry, Lloyd, is when if I go from one contract to another contract, most of the time it's not a completely new contract, right? It's a refined contract. It is a new contract, but there's going to be a lot of old contract material that's just basically copy and pasted into it. And Jesus himself addresses a lot of some of the major changes, like with the food laws, with the Sabbath day and stuff like that. Those are some of the major changes, but Jesus literally addresses them. And then we can kind of assume in a lot of the other senses that, sins are still sins and we should work to avoid them.
yeah, no, I mean there are some major changes. Like for instance, although Islamic Sharia goes back to the old Mosaic laws.
Mm-hmm.
So of course they bring back, for instance, the laws of stoning, which are still valid today in Islam under full Sharia. If you have the strict interpretation, not interpretation, no, the strict application of Sharia, the azim, then you are going to stone people to death for blasphemy, right? Muhammad would be stoned to death for blasphemy, for making prophecies that didn't come true, and blah blah blah, right? But so we have a moral change as well under Jesus. We don't stone people, but he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Mm-hmm.
basically with that incident, that concept of stoning people to death was abandoned in Christian belief. They said this is barbaric. It's no longer valid. It's no longer real. Right? For us as Christians, we have forgiveness now. Right? We were forgiven and we forgive. So yeah, so Jesus treated many people with forgiveness. He abandoned those aspects, the barbaric aspects of the old law. Islam wants to go back to them.
Yeah.
Right? So those are very different applications. Yeah. So look, if you want to not eat shellfish, that's in the old Mosaic law. Yes, you can do that. Knock yourself out.
Right.
There's nothing stopping you. Right.
Right.
However, it's not going to bring you salvation.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. Guys, we should wrap it up. Again, thanks for bearing with me for some of the technical glitches. Yeah, I made some technical changes. I put each stream on a different audio channel to record them to different channels, and that didn't work. I need to keep them all on the same channel until I figure out the audio issues. But yeah, so that was a change I made. That I tried something fresh today. Shouldn't have done that without testing it more thoroughly.
It worked out cool though. And one thing I've done, brother, is I'll put timestamps. Like if something goes awry, I'll just put a timestamp and pin it to my thing, so people, if they're watching the video, they can just click the timestamp and it'll jump them forward to where the glitch got fixed.
Awesome. Yeah. Much better. Yeah, so Coca Jasmine, thanks for your comments. Let me just get rid of that. So, okay, guys, thank you. That's it. And David, thank you very much. I think that was you for the donation. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, I actually have saved all the money that I received. One time, though, I used the money to buy some editing software that I needed. So the money went towards that. So thank you very much. I actually bought software for this purpose for what I'm doing. The computer is fairly powerful, but yeah, I've actually been buying things and I've saved the rest of it. And yeah, as I need new things. So at some point, I also bought a green screen. I bought some lights. So the money actually has gone towards just getting my stream going, getting everything a little bit more professional. I'm trying to educate myself. So yeah, I'm not buying, whiskey or chocolate bunnies with it. It's actually
You're not
going
getting cigarettes and booze, man. Come on, what is
no,
this?
dude, it's not like I'm made enough to buy a house or anything. But yeah, I've actually been using it to actually try to improve things. So hopefully every week I'll get a little bit better. But thanks for bearing with us. So guys, yeah, hopefully find you in the comments. And I've got a stream coming up with Thaddeus on Tuesday, and I will be doing another stream myself. And soon there's some things I want to talk about. And of course, 18 I will see you in a week. We've also got many other plans for other streams. And if you have any thoughts, let me know. Anything I forgot, I know we said at the beginning we wanted to chat about some things, but drop those in the comments and I will make a note of them and pick them up next week, because we're trying to keep this stream reasonably short.
Reasonable.
Yeah, reasonable. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for the time, and we shall see you soon. A flux capacitor can power your PC. Yes, DHC. Yeah, no, thanks, guys.
1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah, we all need that. We all need that flux capacitor. So guys, yeah, I'm going to end it here, but thank you all very much, and God bless you all. Take care. We shall see you all soon.
See you guys.
Good night. Bye.